Getting back to Opal Creek after the fire isn't easy for me and photographer Todd Sonfleith. The forest surrounding it is closed to the public, and its trails are riddled with downed trees and washouts like this one. The only reason we're allowed in is because we're going with some folks from the Opal Creek Ancient Forest Center.
This will be the first time that we've hiked in with a special use permit from the Forest Service. And we have a somewhat special relationship because we're property owners and inholders of that property inside Forest Service land. And so that gives us access that others don't have.
Like us, Dwayne wants to see what's left of his group's educational center at Jawbone Flats and how the enchanting forest surrounding it has changed. The Opal Creek Wilderness covers more than 20,000 acres of the Willamette National Forest east of Salem. It's home to one of the largest old-growth forests Oregon has left.
So we're in a pretty old part of the forest here.
And it's lured field guide back again and again. This is what the area looked like in 1998, after it was first set aside as wilderness. We went back again in 2007.
Get him before he goes away. There you go.
As Opal Creek was building a reputation as one of the best places in the Northwest to learn firsthand about ancient forests.
What kind of newt? Rough-skin newt, that's right.
This is Cedar Flats. These big ones are close to 800 to 1,000 years old.
Field guide photographers always looked forward to filming luminous pools like this one. Crystal clear and completely protected in an unlogged watershed. Then, in August of 2020, lightning sparked the Beachy Creek wildfire in the heart of the wilderness, just 2 miles away from the Opal Creek Ancient Forest Center.
911, what is your emergency?
We need help in Gates. There's a fire coming up in the neighborhood. It's huge. Oh my God. Oh my God.
The fire raced through the forest, as well as communities up and down the Santiam Canyon. Altogether, it burned nearly 200,000 acres of land. It destroyed hundreds of homes in the nearby towns of Detroit, Gates, and Mill City. And it killed 5 people. That's a lot to recover from. As hard as it is to get to Opal Creek this time around, we know it'll be even harder to see what the fire did to the place so many Oregonians know and love and can't visit right now. Dwayne says there's still serious safety risks in the area, including some fires still burning underground almost a year later.
The forest is still closed, and for good reason, because there are still flare-ups happening in the forest and, still additional dangers.
This is interesting. Here's a western red cedar that survived. Here's a little huckleberry that's still alive.
Fire ecologist Boone Kaufman brought some much-needed optimism.
Just envision 6 months ago, it was flaming here. It was probably 1,000 degrees at this site. And you can see how much of the forest floor was consumed, yet so many of the plants survive even those harsh conditions. In a few years, I would envision this area just will be loaded with beautiful white plumes of this bear grass. Virtually all of the plants and animals of these forests evolved to survive and even thrive, and quite often even depend upon fire for their survival and for their reproduction. This is nice. You look here real closely. Here's a small little conifer seedling. And look, here's another one. You can tell it's a Douglas fir. It has the little mouse tail. There's the little Douglas fir seedling coming out. So you see that as quickly as the forest is destroyed, the seedlings come right back. It's magnificent, isn't it?
As we get closer to Jawbone Flats, we start seeing evidence of the old mines and the miners who used to live here.
It looks really different now. Oh, look at that.
Augie Gleason manages the Ancient Forest Center facilities. He's the first to notice that the fire burned the last remaining cabin in this abandoned mining camp.
It was one of the most beautiful cabins actually out here.
So it was actually a lived-in cabin.
This was more than just one building. This had covered walkways and rails to the mine and down to that mine. And I mean, it was a whole town too, just like Jawbone was right here.
Some of the surrounding forest is still alive and green. But arriving at Jawbone Flats is heartbreaking. The fire leveled all of the original 1930s mining camp buildings. It's hard to tell the difference between the rusty old mining equipment and things the fire only recently destroyed.
So was that an old wrecked vehicle, or was that a...
Nope, that was my Suburban.
Oh.
And this is our Pelton wheel. This is basically where our hydropower came in. And
Field Guide filmed this exact spot in 2007 on a tour with facilities director Adam Mims.
We have about 3/4 of a mile of pipe that brings this water downhill. It's all gravity fed.
Back then, it was the perfect place to scoop up a refreshing cup of water from nearby Flume Creek. But there's no water flowing through it now. And it's unclear whether that water source will still be usable after the fire. When we visited in 2007, the commissary building was new. Now its shattered solar panels are among the rubble. This was a renovated cabin we toured.
We have new stove, on-demand hot water heater, and so we don't have to store
Now, that's all gone. The only remaining cabin is this one. The good news is it was untouched by the fire, so our crew has sleeping quarters for the night.
This cabin is not one of the originals. It's great to have a cabin left. We may decide to expand it to build a new lodge or some other purpose. It certainly will stick around.
Only from the air can you get the full sense of how large and destructive this fire was. The right side of this ridge is the Opal Creek drainage. You can see that Jawbone Flats is actually a bit of an oasis in a landscape that was scorched. We join Dwayne as he hikes to one of his favorite spots on Opal Creek.
I think hope was the thing that we had once the sadness faded away. The beauty of the water is the same, and it's running just as clear and blue. The surroundings are torched, but the waterway is still there, and there's still trees around it.
Along the trail, you can see the remains of the old mining camp office.
Cabin 1, which was the original office for the mining company, sat a little bit up on stilts and looked over a waterfall on Battle Axe Creek. It had this beautiful deck, but it was my favorite because you had that just amazing setting in the forest. There was, of course, the sadness of the loss. The buildings were touchstones for memories for people. You know, I remember sitting there with a friend and talking about going to Opal Pool.
We had to brace ourselves for what the famously photogenic Opal Pool would look like now.
Yeah, the bridge was over here.
It is a chilling sight. The forest surrounding this pool was obliterated. And the iconic bridge we'd walked across on an earlier visit is gone.
This is one of the main destinations for people that came to stay with us, and also for hikers.
3, 2, 1. Oh, that's cool.
This was the hardest thing to look at when I first came here, was just the intense devastation of the fire, and it's still hard to see.
Boy, this is a very incredible sight.
Boone says the fire killed almost all of these trees, many of which were between 100 and 200 years old.
This would be clearly a standard placing high severity, as high a severity fire as you'll ever see, because of what must have been about the most extreme weather that could have ever occurred during a fire in the Western Cascades, to have not only killed such a high proportion of the trees, but to have blown them over.
But even here, where the fire wiped out so much beautiful scenery, Boone finds hope.
Interesting is if you look, the last few trees that are still standing are still green. They survived the fire. And then if you look at the understory though, you can see the understory is starting to sprout. It's coming back to life. You have snowbrush, you have the salal here. What you see is you can just see the dozens of conifer seedlings. These are western hemlock seedlings that have all come in the first year. So while it looks devastating to many people, you know, these species have evolved over millennia, and now we have the future forest right before our eyes.
This is cabin 9.
For Augie, this visit is especially personal.
This is my hang drum. This was made out of a propane tank.
As a staff member, this was his home.
Yeah, it's intense. Here's my rifle.
He took these photos as the fire burned closer and closer to Jawbone Flats. He regrets not taking more with him when he evacuated.
We were supposed to leave, and I then said, okay, let's get out of here. Let's just leave. I felt like I was coming back. It's like an optimist to a fault, you know? I'm very hopeful. I just saw this place being here, no matter what. And so I left all my tools. I left everything. Oh. It seemed like the whole state was on fire. It was very, very difficult because we had nowhere to go. We didn't know what to do, and that's what this brings up for me. Because I took care of these buildings as well, you know. So this is George's cabin.
A painful loss for Augie and many others was the death of George Attia.
He was in cabin 8, right next to me, and we could always kind of see each other.
You can see they're hitting it pretty hard. It doesn't look like there's very much left whether we can keep this going. When people say that
George led the fight to protect this forest from logging during the timber wars of the 80s and 90s. And he died in the Beachie Creek Fire at his home in the nearby Elkhorn community.
Oh, he loved it here. He loved the people. He loved this spot in particular, and he grew up here.
Because of a burned bridge, the ancient forest center still doesn't have road access, nearly a year after the fire. So it's going to take extra time to rebuild. Over the past century, the Opal Creek Forest has been a mining camp, an education center, and a wilderness playground for 20,000 visitors a year. Augie says after all that, maybe the forest needs a break.
Here, that one.
There's a lot of people that come through here every year. Yes, this is a magical place, and it said, I'm done. You got to get out of here. I need time. I'm happy that it's taking time.
You know, a little rebirth out of the ashes.
It needs to heal, and it's a different kind of way to look at it. And some people might not understand it because they feel that they have lost something, but it's temporary. Everything is temporary.